Welcome to Author Stories, the podcast where we talk to the best writers in the industry and discuss writing and the creative process. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or both, we hope you'll find something here that makes you love books and the writers that create them. You can find archives of all of the great conversations I've had with authors over the years at hankgarner.com. Take some time and browse around there. I'm sure you'll find a new author to love, find inspiration for your own creative life, and find a new story to get lost in. Let's thank some sponsors who make the show possible. Jasper T. Scott. His box set Dark Space, the complete series. This is 6 books bundled together, on sale now for 99 cents. 6 complete books, over 600,000 copies sold, more than 2,000 pages of epic space opera for the low price of 99 cents. Also available in Kindle Unlimited if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber. Humanity is defeated. 10 years ago, the Scythians invaded the galaxy with one goal: to wipe out the human race. Now the survivors are hiding in the last human sector of the galaxy, Dark Space, once a place of exile for criminals, now the last refuge of mankind. The once galaxy-spanning Imperium of Star Systems is left guarding the gate, which is the only way in or out of Dark Space, but not everyone is satisfied with their governance. Freelancer and ex-convict Ethan Ortain is on the run. He owes crime lord Alec Barandi 10,000 souls, and his ship is badly damaged. When Barandi catches up with him, he makes an offer Ethan can't refuse. Ethan must infiltrate and sabotage the Valiant, the Imperial Star Systems fleet carrier which stands guarding the entrance of Dark Space, and then his debt will be cleared. While Ethan is still undecided about what he'll do, he realizes that the Imperium has been lying and putting all of Dark Space at risk. Now Barandi's plan is starting to look like a necessary evil, but before Ethan can act on it, he discovers that the real plan was much more sinister than what he was told, and he will be lucky to escape the Valiant alive. Grab all 6 books for 99 cents right now. Dark Space, the complete series by Jasper T. Scott. The Unwelcome Trilogy by R.D. Brady. Survivor, Mother, Leader, and Humanity's Last Chance. Deep within the remnants of the United States, Lila Richards oversees a camp of 200 survivors. In a world where living is an everyday struggle, and only through banding together can people survive, the arrival of the unwelcome only made her job harder. Riley Quinn and Miles Jones have been raised by Lila for the last 5 years. They're also one of the cursed, the children between the ages of 13 and 18, whom the unwelcome kill on sight. No questions, no pleas, just death. Protecting one another and the people of their camp is ingrained in all of them, but now each of them faces increased danger as the reason why the cursed have been targeted by the unwelcome slowly comes to light, and that truth will shock them to their core. Now time is running out, not just for the cursed who are being hunted down by the unwelcome, not just for Lila and her family who will face the greatest challenge yet, but for all of humanity. The world changed radically 35 years ago, but today humanity's very existence is on the line, and the fight has begun that will ensure its future or its annihilation. Fans of A.G. Riddle, James Rollins, Suzanne Collins, and Brandon Sanderson will love the Unwelcome Trilogy. Pick up your copy of the Unwelcome Trilogy on Amazon today. Edge of Valor, a military sci-fi thriller by Josh Hayes. When their mission fails, his begins. David Weber calls it a tour de force. Special Agent Jackson Fisher is a man after truth. When a military operation to extract a high-ranking ambassador from the war-torn border world of Stonemaier ends in disaster, Fisher is called in to investigate. A whole platoon went in, but only 3 Alliance Marines returned home. The rest killed in action along with hundreds of civilians. With tensions between the Holloman Alliance and Stonemaier rising, Fisher attempts to stitch the pieces together. One thing becomes more and more certain: the surviving Marines are lying. As the truth unfurls, Fisher begins to realize this was far more than a simple rescue mission, and that the truth might be something best left buried. Filled with action, mystery, and well-crafted characters, Edge of Valor, the Valor Series Book 1, will put you into a world of war, conspiracy, and betrayal. It's perfect for fans of David Weber's Honorverse or Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan with a futuristic flair. That's Edge of Valor by Josh Hayes. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Krista Driver on the show with me today. She has an awesome new book called Pedi, A True Life Rags to Riches Story. Krista, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I'll tell you what, this book really caught me by surprise at how fun and engaging it is, and what a great read. It's not often that we get to read a book that we feel better at the end than when we started the book.
Well, that's a high compliment. Thank you. And writing it was the same experience for me.
That's awesome. Well, we've got a lot to talk about, but before we do, we begin each show with the same question. And that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I don't really have a memory of wanting to write. It wasn't something that was even on my radar. So this was a surprise for me as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love those stories where it just kind of comes out of the ether and a story needs to be told. Were you a big reader as a kid? Did you have a bookish life?
Yes, I've always enjoyed reading. I was the kid you could find off somewhere with a book rather than out playing with the other kids. So I've always had a love of reading, and writing wasn't something I was really confident that I could do. So through this experience, I gained that confidence as a writer.
I love that. What has been your career path up until now?
I'm actually a licensed therapist. I have a doctorate in psychology, and my career has been clinical. And I've always been interested in people's stories. That's something that has been a footprint for me my entire career.
Yeah, I was going to say that it sounds like the work that you do and have done for quite a while is it's all about stories, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's something that's been ingrained in me forever. I've just been fascinated with people's stories.
So what was the initial desire to pursue that line of work?
I just have always been interested in people. I think that's the spark and the desire to go into clinical work. It's just expanded from there. Now I'm the CEO of a counseling center, and so now I'm on the other side teaching other clinicians how to be, their best as a counselor.
What is a counselor's main job with regard to if a new client comes in or a new patient? What do you hope to accomplish with someone?
Well, what I tell the clinicians here at Mariposa that our job really is to listen and just show up for our clients. It's not a magic wand to fix their problems. It's really just to be somebody, a safe person for them to talk to, and that is the best that we can do. In addition to that, we can help diagnose and those things that come with being a therapist. But really, our main focus is just being a safe person for our clients.
What is it about telling our stories to someone, sometimes a complete stranger, that is therapeutic? Sometimes in a counseling situation, people work through things and gain some resolution just by simply talking about it. What is it about sharing our stories that becomes therapeutic?
Well, I think that's twofold. One, what we say in the clinical world is that secrets keep us sick. So when we're holding on to secrets or those stories, it's keeping us in a perpetual cycle often of maladaptive coping behaviors and et cetera. So in sharing our story, we're letting those secrets out. And it's very freeing for people that are holding on to trauma or whatever happened in their life. So telling your story is healing in and of itself.
Yeah. In hearing so many people's stories, are you ever struck by imagination that comes out of those situations where maybe you think, oh, this scenario, not necessarily this particular person's details, but this scenario would be a great jumping off point for a book?
Uh, I mean, I could, but that would be an ethical dilemma. But oftentimes people's stories are just intricate and complex and, interesting. So, I mean, I've heard so many stories that could be a book, but I mean, I can't really write their stories.
Right. Your new book, Manny Pedi, is a true story, right?
It is a true story, yes.
How did you stumble on this story?
It's quite by accident. It was that curiosity that I've always had about people and going to the salon that I've gone to for 20 years and, looking at people in the chairs and wondering about their lives. And what I realized is that I wasn't including the technicians in that wandering. And I questioned myself, how did I forget them? How did I not see them? And so I started asking the technicians about their life. And the stories that they were telling me were so powerful that I felt compelled to tell them. And that's what sparked writing this book, was to tell these women's stories. And over the course of work on this project, I came to the conclusion to write one person's story to tell a collective whole. So that's why I landed on Charlie as the main subject.
So how did you discover Charlie?
It was one of those things by accident. I was meeting with a CEO of another nonprofit, and in the conversation, I noticed her nails, and oh, your nails are so pretty. And I'm writing a book about the nail industry, and she said, oh, you really should meet my board member. His mom had something to do with the industry, and so that's how I met Charlie Vo, was through her son, Mike Vo.
Oh, that's fantastic. I would imagine that when you hear something like that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like the ground floor that I've been looking for.
Yes. And actually I had been working with an agent, and she suggested instead of writing multiple women's stories, just pick one person. And I'm like, how am I going to find one person that could carry an arc all the way through an entire book? And then when I met Charlie, it was like, she's the one. Her story is so fantastic.
Well, she's like a unicorn for the subject matter that you were looking for. I mean, this is a ground floor person.
Really, I mean, she's tiny. She's just under 5 feet. This little feisty, just scrappy, will do anything, work hard person. It was phenomenal to meet her.
Absolutely. So, when you approached Charlie with this, what was her reaction to someone wanting to tell her story?
First, I think she was a little bit surprised that somebody would take an interest in her story, but she really gravitated to the project and was humbled and proud to have her story told. And so it was a beautiful connection.
A lot of times when we're telling someone else a story and we are kind of learning details about their life and looking for these threads that other people will find interesting, it's always interesting to me how our own stories tend to come up and we start experiencing feelings and empathy and different things like that, because a lot of times, even though the particular circumstances may be different, the human experience is the same a lot of times across boundaries. Did you learn things about yourself in the writing of Charlie's story?
Oh my gosh, I sure did. I considered myself pretty confident before I knew who I was and settled in my life. And when I started this project, I suddenly found myself insecure. I didn't know that I could do justice to the story. I felt a lot of pressure doing that. But in understanding Charlie's as an underdog, really, as a group of people as an underdog, I began to see myself in that same place, kind of, as a writer, of being an unknown, being inexperienced. And so I mirrored that in some ways. And so I had my own process of going through those feelings of insecurity through this project. And it was when I was sitting at a table with Charlie Vo and Olivett, her business partner, and I heard them laughing and telling stories and, really how they overcame. It's like I realized I could overcome my insecurity as a writer and in anything. And they really encouraged me as an individual.
That is fantastic. It's so, and I guess that's why we love biographies or memoir, because we get to see a bit of ourselves in other people's stories, and we get to see a story of triumph, hopefully, and then maybe that gives us hope to think that we can experience a bit of that triumph as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what did you start learning about Charlie? What was it about her background that you found fascinating?
Well, Charlie has a unique story, and yet it's not unlike other people that have, found themselves in Vietnam, in a communist country, and suffering under that regime and wanting a better life for their family. So what I learned about Charlie is that she is innovative and always looking for the next thing and always looking for a way to better her life and just never, ever giving up. And that was the biggest lesson for me in terms of who Charlie was. She's just this enormous personality and never gave up.
So Charlie was is Vietnamese and immigrated to the United States. What was that process like for her?
I would like to say it happened overnight, but it didn't. And for like many people, escaping was extremely dangerous. It was illegal. And the first time that she and her two young children were going to leave, they were caught and they were put in prison in Vietnam and suffered in horrible conditions in that prison. And the whole time she was in there, she was thinking about her next escape, about her next attempt, and just never stopping that loop in her head of we're going to get out of here. And that's Charlie. I mean, just incredible suffrage that she and her family went through. It took them about 2.5 years to get from that point into the United States.
How much trust had to be built between you and Charlie to get her to open up about those tragic times and the escapes and the oppression that they went through? Like, what do you do as a writer to earn someone's trust enough that they, and that word just keeps coming up, they trust you enough to tell that story to you?
Yeah, I don't know what that would have been. I mean, it all just happened organically with Charlie and I and her son. We had to trust each other. I had to trust that she was telling me a complete story, and she had to trust me to tell her story in a way that was truthful and honest. So the trust was mutual, and it built right away. I can't explain how that was, but it was instant and organic.
So she's from a communist regime, which is horrible and terrible and all of that. But I would think, and I'm just trying to put myself in someone else's shoes that's been through that at least it was a known entity. It was you know what to expect from life in communist controlled Vietnam, and it's not good, but at least you know what it is. When you come to America and you're a stranger and you are not familiar with the system and things are not guaranteed and you are kind of left to your own devices, what happened with them when they got to America?
When Charlie and her family arrived here, they were sponsored by a church and by a family member that was here already. So they really only had that connection to America. And that church and the uncle, helped them for about a week and prepared them for. But nothing could prepare Charlie for the nuances of being in America. And she described watching American television in Vietnam before the Fall of Saigon. And, what she saw on TV were palm trees and hippies all over and, the Brady Bunch. And that's what she thought America was. And when she got here, it really wasn't those things. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. And so she had to learn those nuances. For example, when she learned to driving down the street and just stopping her car and going to see what she wanted to see. She didn't realize you had to park the car and, there was rules around driving. She didn't know that. She didn't know in Los Angeles not to pull out a wad of cash when she was shopping. And so those were the things that she had to learn, that nothing could really prepare her for that. And thankfully, she met Olivett, and Olivett was her business partner, and an African American woman in LA. And she taught Charlie a lot about how to be in America.
So she finds herself in this burgeoning, booming nail industry. How did that happen, and what is it about this industry that finds so many immigrants like her in this line of work?
Well, it's really a fascinating tale of Tippi Hedren, who was an actress in, you may remember her, The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock. Tippi was working in a camp up in Northern California that had these refugee women from Vietnam, and she was trying to help them find employment and was having a difficult time. So she noticed that they liked her nails, and so she brought her manicurist up and taught these women how to do nails. And that was really the start of the nail industry in California. I mean, it was here before, but it was primarily for celebrities and not really for the common folks like me. So Tippi taught them, and from there it blossomed out, and those women opened salons and taught people, and it began to grow rapidly. So when Charlie got here, there was an industry already in place that could get her employed quickly, that she didn't have to have a command of the English language to be successful. And so a lot of those women gravitated towards that industry because of that, because they could get to work and not have to go to years of school to have a career in something else.
The relationship between Charlie and Olivett is fantastic, and the way you bring them together in the book, and it's a powerful story thread through this. Tell us about Olivett, and how odd was this pairing that these two became friends?
Well, I mean, if you consider Los Angeles in the early 80s, mid-80s, racial tensions were really high at that time. So for an African American and a Vietnamese woman to come together would have been odd at that time. It just didn't happen. And so all of that was Charlie's client, and really helped Charlie see that she had options, that she didn't have to continue working in the salon she was working in. And they became friends. And I mean, if you saw those two together, it's incredible. They're like closer than sisters still to this day. And Olivett is this big personality and happy and just this charming woman. And those two together are, just to sit back and watch them is so refreshing to see that kind of a relationship that they have formed. And I'm currently in the process of writing Olivett's story, which is powerful in itself as well. So these two women are just amazing.
That is fantastic. It really is the American dream. If you learn anything from this book, it is that anything is possible. At what point in the interviews that well, first off, but before we do that, how did you go about doing the research for this book? So Charlie is your primary source, I would assume.
Yes.
Did you guys set up formal interviews? Was it just lunches together and sharing stories? How do you go about gathering all the information that you need?
Well, initially there were a few formal interviews that I had with Charlie and her son. And then after that, it was literally just sitting around Olivett's table with Charlie and listening to them tell stories and remember. And I just sat back and watched, and I gathered a lot of information just by that process. There was some research that I conducted about Vietnam, the camps that they were in, the prison that she was in, but most of it was just watching these two women and pulling out their stories that way.
When you start writing the book, what's always interesting to me when you look at biographies or memoir is how you find the narrative thread and where you begin the story and where the story ends. As you're gathering all this information and hearing stories and all of that stuff, where did you start identifying, okay, this is where the story is going to be?
Well, the story kind of emerged at different phases. So initially, I was working with another writer on this project. And when we got to the editor gave us an assignment to really flesh out why we wanted to write it and what we were writing. And we realized that we had two different ideas. She wanted to really focus on the nail industry, which is interesting and fascinating in itself. And I wanted to focus on the women's story. So we parted ways on that, and I went solo on the story. So I had already gathered quite a bit of information at that point. And when I laid it all out, literally on 3x5 cards on my desk, I just kind of the timeline was beginning to end. I mean, it fit perfectly that way. And that's how I decided to do it. I don't know if that's the correct process, but that was my process.
You tell the story from your perspective and your interactions with Charlie. Did you find yourself becoming a character in the book?
I didn't, and initially I wasn't going to do it that way, but I needed to have ways to segue. I needed to have a transition, and so to get those transitions more smoothly, I inserted myself as a voice in the book, and it really worked out well in terms of those transitions. But I wasn't intending to be a character in the book. It just kind of happened that my voice was inserted to be able to transition from, certain topics.
Yeah. What's fascinating about Charlie's story is from abject poverty and living under an oppressive regime to being very well off in America, in the land of the free, in such a short amount of time that Charlie progressed through all of this in a relatively short amount of time. Other people may think, I've been working hard my entire life and I'll never make the kind of fortune that Charlie's made and made the name for herself that she did. What do you think is unique about Charlie's story that might encourage all the rest of the people out there listening?
Well, Charlie, I don't think the woman ever slept. She just worked constantly. So a lot of it was her fortitude and her work ethic, and a lot of it was luck. I mean, she met Olivett at the perfect right time, and the industry was ripe for her to come in and build on that. So, a combination of her sheer will to succeed. But I don't want to underscore the women that work in the nail industry that are technicians that don't rise to own a salon or own a supply company or manufacturing company. Those women work really hard. And you hear them say, my son is at Yale, or my daughter is at Harvard, or they're sending their kids, the second generations, to universities. And those kids are becoming doctors and lawyers. And, they're living the American dream really as a direct result of their parents working so hard. So I think anybody can achieve success. It's just, what do we define success as?
Right. Well, the book Mani Pedi, A True Life Rags to Riches Story is out everywhere today in paperback and Kindle edition. Krista, it's such a fascinating book. Thank you for sharing it with us, and I look forward to reading Olivett's story. How's that book coming along?
Great. I just got back from a tour of the Deep South, and I'm tracing her family, and it's just fascinating. And the cool thing is that Olivett didn't know these things about her family. So as I'm discovering her family, she's discovering them as well. So it's just fun. It's a lot more research, but just a good story.
Awesome. Krista, if people are just learning about you, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
There is. I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on my website. It's just about ready to go live. I just got an email from the website designer. So, yes, absolutely. Facebook, Dr. Krista Driver, and I'm also on Instagram. So, lots of ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. We'll put links to all of it in the show notes of this episode, as well as a link to the book. Manny Pedi, a true life rags to riches story. Krista, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you for getting up early and talking with me.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The year was 1834. The month was December. I was 14. Irving's tale was by then well known. The characters of Brom Bones and the beauteous Katrina were widely understood in town to refer to my parents. Rumors persisted. I heard the name of Headless Horseman whispered. My father dismissed all these tales, calling them malicious. Yet more than once I saw him and my mother scanning Agatha's face across the supper table, finding only a secret smile and a look of defiance. I found the rumors fascinating. I followed Agatha like a pup, waiting for her to cast some magic spell. And one day she did. The household servants had set a fire in the hearth for her comfort, and she sat close to it, counting out small gold coins upon a lap board. I hid in the shadows, hoping she might drop a coin and I could retrieve it for myself. One of her servants, a West Indian girl, carried a snowy log into the room and set it on the fire. It began to hiss and pop, the snow melted, and the fire sputtered out. Agatha cursed as I had never heard her do before. She stood, spilling all the gold, and slapped the idiot girl across the face. The girl ran, and my grandmother muttered to herself, searching for match and tong to no avail. When she was not looking, I crept forward and took for myself one of the gold pieces. Then something remarkable occurred. My grandmother sighed, knelt before the fireplace, reached for the logs, and her right hand caught a fire. Flame blossomed and coiled about her wrist. I gasped and cried out, "Shh! Don't be afraid, my Dylan." "Your hand!" She raised her palm. Flame sat cupped in it, casting the shadow of her fingers upon the ceiling and walls. "Lock the door," she said. I obeyed. She pointed to the floor, and I sat, waiting breathlessly. "This is the Van Brunt gift. It will be your gift as well, soon, and your children's forever afterwards." "Why does it not burn you?" I asked. "Why should it? Do I deserve to be burned?" "No." "Then I am safe from the fire. Do you deserve to be burned, my Dylan?" I shook my head. "Show me." I reached for the flame and took it. I pulled back at once, crying out with pain, wagging my fingertips. The fire caught my sleeve. I could not rid myself of it, as if I clutched burning tar. The pain intensified. The blisters broke, and a rivulet of lymph ran down my arm. "Your conscience knows, Dylan. You deserved to be burned. Say it." "I deserved to be burned," said I. "Again." "I deserved to be burned." She turned her palm. "The gold piece." I nodded and brought the stolen coin from my pocket. She took it and raised it to the light. "You cannot wield the flame with guilt in your heart, son. Try, and it will devour you. Do you understand?" I nodded. "A Van Brunt should not be so weak." "I'm sorry I took the gold, Grandmother. I'm sorry I was bad. Don't be ashamed of me." She frowned and laid the gold coin on her lapboard. She shook her head sadly. "I'm not ashamed that you took the gold. I'm ashamed that you felt the guilt.